Hello, today I'll be coding this animation. The way I do this is split it into frames, get the dimensions of the SVG, get the number of frames, the delay in between two consecutive frames. Then, using the DevTools color picker, I'm going to get the colors. I'm going to get distances, dimensions, and stuff like that. So let's get started. We're going to have a width for my SVG. That's going to be 400. And just in case we decide to change this later, we're going to set the height as a fraction of the width. So it's going to be relative to the width. Now we're going to have the coordinates of the top left corner, and they're going to be minus half the dimensions. So minus half the width and minus half the height. Okay, now we're going to have the SVG. It's going to have a view box. And this one is going to be made from an array where I have the coordinates of the top left corner and then the dimensions along the two axes. Then I join this array with a space. Okay, and this is the SVG. Then I'm going to have everything in a group that we're going to call Wi-Fi. Then we're going to have two groups inside, and one is going to be the guidelines, so guides. And the second one is going to be the actual Wi-Fi arcs, the blue arcs. So arcs, and here I'm going to have a square, and let's see about the dimensions and the position. So first of all, we're going to have a base distance in between two grid lines, and that's going to be 0.04 times the width, and we're going to have a number of grid cells along one dimension, and that's going to be 5. Then we're going to have a grid size that's the number of grid cells along one dimension times the base distance between two grid lines. So like this. And the top left corner is going to be of equal coordinates, and they're going to be minus half the grid size. So now we're going to have that x and the y, so the position are that geo. So they both have the same value. And the same for the width and the height, they have the same value, which is the grid size. So height is also the grid size, and we should see it. And now we're going to do a bit of styling, because if we're going to add the lines later, we're not going to see them over that black square. So we're going to have a components list, and here we're going to have guides and arcs. So arcs. We're going to have a number of groups, and this is going to be the length of this component list. Then we're going to have a loop, so for the group index from 0 to the number of groups, we're going to have the current group is nth components, the group index plus 1. Then we're going to get the group name, which is the first item in the group. So far the only one, but we're going to take care of that. So group 1. Okay, now we're going to have a selector, an attribute selector, and here we're going to use the ID is the group name. We need to interpolate it. Okay, now we're also going to set a fill and a stroke here. So it's going to be none in this case. Okay, and here we're going to have some blue values. So something like this, and another blue value for the stroke, and okay, this should work. And here I'm going to have fill, and I'm also going to have, this is 2, and this is stroke. Okay, good. Now let's get back to the structure, and we're going to have two more groups here. We're going to have lines and another group that's circles. And here we're going to have a loop. So for I from 1 to n, and we increment it every time. Let's put a space in there. And here we're going to have a current coordinate. Okay, so this is going to be I minus half of n times the base distance. Okay, and now we're going to have path line. Okay, and this is going to have a d attribute. So we start from the current coordinate horizontally, and we have the grid top, so GO, and then we go vertically by the grid size. So it's going to be pretty much the same again, except this is going to be horizontally, and these two are going to get reversed. So we should have the horizontal lines as well now. Okay, now for the circles, we're going to have something similar, except we're not going to have this current coordinate. We're going to have smaller or equal. Here it's going to be circle. We're going to have the x coordinate of the origin, so cx is going to be equal to the left of the grid, and the y coordinate is going to be the bottom of the grid, so that's minus g0, go, and the radius is going to be I times the base distance. So now we have the circles. Okay, now let's go for the arcs. So here we're going to have a similar loop, except we're going to start from 0 and we're only going to go to half of n. Okay. So here we should have a current y, and this one is going to be half of n minus 1 minus 2 times I, and everything gets multiplied with base distance. Then we're going to have a current radius that's 2 times I times the base distance, and a second current radius that's this current radius plus the base distance. Okay, now we're going to have an arc path, and this one is going to have a d attribute. That's we're going to start at the grid left, so GO. We're going to use the current y coordinate. Okay. Am I going to reuse this anywhere? Nope. So you don't need to compute it. Just put it there, because it's not going to get reused anyway. Okay. And then we're going to have a vertical line that's going to be a base distance. Then we may or may not have something, then a horizontal line that's going to be a base distance. Okay, and then we're going to have an arc. So here, depending on I, we may or may not have something. So in this case, nothing. But here, we may have an arc. So it's going to be a relative arc. And we're going to use the current radius for the radius along the x-axis. Same along the y-axis, no rotation, smaller than half a circle, going clockwise. And then we go right by the current radius and down by the current radius. So this is what we have for now. And then we're going to have one final arc here, and this is going to use the second radius. So this is going to be 1. It's going to go in the opposite direction, and this one's going to be with minus, as well as this one, because they're going left and up. Okay, so now I have my shape, which is really good. Now the drawing, the way that I do the drawing is by animating stroke dash offset, and I need to compute the lengths of these paths. So in order to do this, I need to send these dimensions into the CSS. So I'm going to do that with CSS custom properties. So I'm going to have a style, and here I'm going to have a root, and I'm going to have my base distance, which is going to be that BD interpolated in pixels. And then I'm also going to have n, which is going to be my n value, and again I need to interpolate it. Okay, so this looks fine. Now let's move on to the styling. So here I'm going to set, for every element I'm going to have an animation. Before that, let's set an animation duration, t, 13 seconds. Okay, here I'm going to set animation. It's going to be a generic A. That animation duration is in out infinite. Okay, so this is for all elements. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is set an animation name here, and it's going to be a fade, the group name. Actually make this like this, fade group name. Okay, and I can collapse this stuff. I'm not going to need it anymore. And here I'm going to create two animations, and one for each of these, one for each group. So keyframes, fade guides, and I'm going to have another one that's going to be keyframes fade arcs. Okay, but before that, let's set some styles on the Wi-Fi. So on this thing, I'm going to have an animation name, position Wi-Fi. So I'm going to have another set of keyframes. This one's going to be position Wi-Fi. So I'm going to have 0%. It's going to be this is going to be a translation and a rotation. So transform, translate Y, it's going to be 0. Rotate, it's going to be 0 degrees initially. Then we're going to have, for 100%, we're going to have a Y difference, so a difference along the Y axis. So let's make it dy, and this is going to be minus 45 degrees. And this one we need to compute it, and the way that we get this, it's going to be calc. It's going to be half of 1 minus square root of 2. I need to interpolate this because it's a SAS function. So square root of 2. And this, I multiply it with n and with the base distance. Okay. So we should start seeing the animation. And one more thing we're going to set here that gets inherited for every element is the current index of the element, which is going to be 0 by default. But it's going to change if we have multiple elements of the same kind. For example, we have more lines and more circles and stuff like that. Okay, so this is it for the Wi-Fi. Now, we don't want that animation to go from 0 to 100%. So we're going to create a timeline. And this is going to be a map. And here we're going to have stuff like rotate Wi-Fi, the initial percentage. Okay. Okay, and we're going to have a final one. Something like this. Okay, and we're going to use this. So here we're going to have, we need to interpolate this stuff, map get the timeline, and the key is going to be this one, and here again it's going to be the final one. So this should now work properly. Now to the timeline, we're going to add stuff related to fading in and out the guides and the actual arcs. So we're going to have something like fade guides initial. Actually, this is going to be the first time we fade them. So because we fade them partially and then we fade them fully. So we're going to have this, and here we're going to have final, and okay, and then we're going to fade this stuff again. Okay, it's going to be a different value here. And we're going to have a final as well this time. Okay. And we're also going to have something similar for the arcs. So here it's arcs. Okay. So this should work, and we're going to have something like this. So for the guides, we're going to have 0 and something similar. Oh, not this. Something similar to what we have here. So 0%, and this is going to be opacity 1. Okay, and this is not going to be rotate Wi-Fi, it's going to be fade guides. So it's going to be the first time, and this one's going to be final, and this one's going to be on the second initial one. This is going to be 0.5. Now we're going to have 0 here. This is for the final one, and we're also going to have 100% here. So this is for the guides. And we're going to have something similar for the arcs, except we're not going to have that 0.5, and we're going to have a tiny bit of a difference. So we're not going to have this 0.5 in the middle, and that's not going to be 0, and it's going to be arcs. We're going to tweak this, but for now, let's fill up this timeline, and we're going to fill it with stuff like this, and we need to draw the square, draw the lines. So this is going to be draw, and here we're going to have square and something like this. Then we're going to have the lines and the circles. So line circle, okay, so here I'm going to have 7, here I'm going to have 10, something like this. Okay, then I'm also going to have something similar for my arcs. So this is going to be for the arcs, and it's going to be okay. Then I'm also going to have a fill for the arcs when they fill up. This is going to be fill. Okay, and fill and so the final. And this is it for the timeline. Good. Now, one more thing we're going to add here for this fade arcs animation. We're going to put this value here, take it from the first, put it into the second, and here I'm also going to have draw arc. So I'm going to have draw arc, and pretty much the same here. Except it's going to be 0.99, just a tiny bit less. So, okay. Now, this is it for this part. Next thing, let's collapse this, the Wi-Fi positions, and let's start adding stuff to this to the components. We're going to have some types, and then we're going to have some animations. Now, the animations, we're going to have, the first type of animation is going to be a drawing animation. So, draw, and it's going to use stroke dash offset, and it's going to use the whole length of the path for the non-initial value. And the second animation is going to be a fill animation, and this one is going to use fill opacity, and that's going to be 0, the non-initial value. And here I'm going to have the first animation only, and here I'm going to have both animations for the arcs. Now here I'm going to have a few types of items, and they're going to be square, line, and circle. Here I'm going to have just one type, and that's going to be arc. Okay, I'm going to have one square, I'm going to have 4 lines, I'm going to have 5 circles, and I'm going to have 3 arcs. Okay, now we need to get this length somehow. So we're going to have to set here a multiplier that we're going to multiply with the base distance between two grid lines. So in the case of the square, we're going to have the number of grid cells times the number of edges. So that's going to be calc 4 times the number of grid cells. In the case of a line, we're just going to have the number of grid cells. In the case of a circle, we're going to have 2 times pi times the current radius. And this current radius is going to depend on the index of the circle. So we're going to have 2 times, we need to interpolate pi, okay, times the current radius of the circle. And this one is going to be going to depend on I, so it's going to be I plus 1. Okay, now for the arc, this value is going to be, so we have it once we have the vertical and linear straight lines, so that's twice the base distance, so 2 times, and then we need to have 2 quarter arcs, so we're going to have 0.5 times, again we need to interpolate pi, and here we're going to have 4 times I plus 1. Okay, so yeah, I think this works. Now one more thing we're going to need to set here is the relative delays. So we're going to have 0 for the square. We only have one element, but anyway. Here we're going to have 0.015. Here we're going to have 0.055, and here we're going to have 0.035. Okay, so we're done with the components thing here. Now let's move on here, and let's see what we still need to do. We're going to have a loop here, but first we're going to get group types, group animations, the number of types, the number of animations. So group types, it's the 4th. The name was the first, the types are the 4th, because you have the stroke and the fill. Okay, now we're going to have the number of types. It's going to be length group types. Similarly for the animations, except this is going to be 5 here. Okay, now we're going to have a loop. So for type index from 0 to the number of types, we're going to have a current type, which is pretty much the same thing as here, except we don't have components, we have group types, and this is the type index. Okay, then we're going to have a type name that's again pretty similar to what we had there, except it's now type. Okay, then we're going to have a list, which is initially empty, a list of animation names. So type animation names. So this is empty initially. Okay, now that we have the type name and stuff like that, we're going to create here a class. It's going to be type name, and here we can set stuff. So the path length, this is going to be calc times. We need to interpolate, and this was the third thing. Yeah, the third. Nth type 3, and we need to multiply this thing. What's wrong? Oh, type, sorry. We need to multiply this with the base distance. Okay, and we're going to set this to stroke dash array. Okay, and we're going to set the animation name. Okay, what's wrong? Okay, what's the problem? Group types. Let's make this. Oh, nth, sorry, that was the problem, not anything else. So this should work. Okay, so yeah, that was the problem. Okay, now for the next thing here, we're going to set an animation delay. And this one is going to be calc. So here I'm going to have that multiplier, which I need to interpolate. So nth type 4. I need to multiply it with the current index. Okay, and I need to subtract 1 because I don't want issues for the first animation. And I multiply this with the animation duration, which I also need to interpolate. And here I can also have stuff like a loop. So for I from 0 to nth type 2, I believe. Okay, going to have nth child I plus 1. And here I'm going to set the current index. It's going to be so yeah, I guess this is it for now. Okay, now I'm going to loop through the animations. So I'm going to have for animation index from 0 to the number of animations. Okay, and here I'm going to have the current animation. It's going to be group animations, animation index plus 1. Then I'm going to have animation name, same way. So okay. Actually, in this case, it's not going to be just animation. I'm going to interpolate this thing. So I'm going to have something like this. Okay. And then I'm going to have the type name. So type name. Okay. And then I'm going to keep adding to this list of animation names. This should work. Okay. Okay. And then I'm going to have some keyframes. And here I'm going to use that animation name. Okay. Then I'm going to have some percentage values I need to compute. So first of all, I'm going to have a final one for the group. So this is going to be map get from the timeline, and I'm going to have this is always fade, and it's going to use the group name. Okay. Final. Okay. And then I'm going to have initial one for the type, but only for the first group. So if the group index greater than 0, then I'm going to have nothing. Otherwise, I'm going to have the final one for the group plus 1%. Okay. What's wrong? Okay. Group name. Sorry. And this isn't. Okay. Now I'm going to have something similar. Now I'm going to have type initial. I'm going to have something like this. Type initial. Except here I'm not going to have fade. I'm going to have the animation name and initial. Okay, this should work. And for the final one, I'm going to have something similar, except it's going to be final, not initial. So, okay, so here I'm going to have 0%, and I'm going to have the initial one, and then I'm going to have 100%. This should work. Oh, that. Okay, and then I'm going to have something similar here, except I'm going to have, there's going to be no 0, and it's going to be type of final, and then I'm going to have, instead of 100%, I'm going to have group final. Okay, and here I'm going to have property. So I'm going to have the property for both. I need to interpolate it. But for the first one, it's not going to be initial, it's going to be the third volume. So this. So this should be it. Except it looks like it doesn't work for some reason. So the drawings don't seem to work. Now let's see what's wrong with the drawings. So draw square. Oh, I haven't set the animation name. That's the problem. And this one is commented out, so that's why it wasn't working. Now it should be working. It's still not working, so let's see the compiled CSS. So what's not working is drawing the lines in. So I have. Okay. I need to do something here. Now it works. Okay, so yeah, this is it. You can see it bigger this way. It fills up, and now it fades out, and now it should start drawing again, and starts drawing the circles. Again, rotated. Yeah, this is it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or any ideas for future videos, just drop them in the comments below or send them on Twitter. And until next time.